Okay. Hello, welcome to another episode of Getting to Know You. As always, I am Matt, and today I am joined. You know what? Damn it! So, this is well, it's too late. We started recording. What a weird thing to have to ask at the beginning of this, and I should have done this before we started. I actually don't know how you want me to refer to you.
Okay.
Because when I met you, I first knew you as Shelly because that was your character in the game we played together.
Mhm.
It seems like you use a different character's name for this. I don't know if you want me to call you by your actual name. And it didn't even occur to me to ask you that before we started.
It's fine. And actually, it's a good thing to always ask that. Just if you're ever uncertain about name or pronouns, it's actually cool. Always ask. Even if you feel a little uncomfortable, you're not sure, it's okay to ask. We're cool with it. Okay,
Yes.
so call me Shelly because that's what you're used to. In
Shelly.
fact, that's
Okay.
the reason I got this character out, because she was actually based on the Shelly that you remember from the City of Heroes days.
Okay.
Has the same last name.
It does indeed. Okay, so Shelly it is. That is fine. So I should, I got completely sidetracked from my intro here. This is another episode of Getting to Know You. I am joined today by my friend Shelly, we're going to be playing some Final Fantasy 14, which is a game that if you're looking at the screen right now, you can see I'm a level 15 guy with horns. I know nothing about this game. I have put very little time into it, so I am going to be absolutely at your mercy as you kind of guide me around, and hopefully I can not get too distracted by not knowing what I'm doing as to interrupt our conversation too much.
I can give you some pointers. It's cool.
That is what we're going to be doing today, and basically we're just going to spend some time having a conversation. So I guess to sort of give a little bit of a backstory on how we know each other. I was thinking about this last night and thinking about recording today. We have known each other for it's got to be going on like 15 years at this point, right?
Yeah.
It must have been like 2005.
5-ish, yeah, somewhere around there. And it's 2020 for reference, so yeah,
yes,
about 15 years.
It's 2020 now. So we met via a no longer existing in its original form MMO called City of Heroes. You were a part of a super group that was what like guilds in that game were. You were a part of a group there that I joined, and that's how we sort of initially met. And it was I guess the type of thing where and actually City of Heroes, I can't speak to your I think you have a longer history with MMOs than I do. That was my first experience with like an online MMO type of game where like the group of people like had like a chat server where you would go and like hang out and just like talk with people outside of that. So that was where we first met, and we played City of Heroes together until 2008 probably is when I went off to college, and they did not have the ports for that game were not open at my college, and that was when I had to stop playing City of Heroes. But yeah. we've played WoW together for a little bit. We've played this a little bit. We've kind of just bounced around, and of course we've been Facebook friends since Facebook was a thing, I guess.
Since it first existed.
Oh my god, this is like I'm 30 now. I just turned 30. I'm starting to like get into conversations with people where I'm saying stuff like, yeah, 15 years ago, and yeah, when Facebook first started, and I'm like, oh god.
That you're gonna find yourself using that phrase back in my day.
Yeah, back in my day. The slow march to the grave has begun.
Oh god.
So I definitely want to I want to spend some time talking about like developing friendships digitally via the internet and via gaming, as that is something that is kind of a situation that we share. I want to talk about a number of other things, but I know you said you sort of have a kind of something that you prepared, and I want to. I guess we'll take this in whatever flow makes the most sense. But I guess if you want to sort of give your prepared statement there to sort of introduce yourself, I guess, and we'll kind of see where that takes us. Just to
we should also start playing the game. Otherwise,
we can start
really
playing. Yeah, everybody's been watching me stand here and occasionally jump for the past 5 minutes. So I'm gonna run in the direction of this arrow that I hope is pointing me in the right direction towards this quest I have. And
well, it said it was back in Ul'dah, right?
yes.
You're going exactly the opposite way.
Shit.
Here, climb on.
Okay.
I'm going to use my high-level player advantage here.
Okay.
You click me, right click, and then hit ride Pigeon.
Oh, I see it.
There you go.
Okay. Hey, all right.
Okay.
Off we go.
So, off we go. So, I was born in Provo, Utah, and sort of grew up in the outskirts of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
I came out as a trans woman when I was 17, 18 years old, sort of late high school.
Okay.
But I knew a long time before that. My family did not take it well.
Okay.
At first, my siblings supported me, but eventually they drifted away because my family moved to the opposite side of the country. I eventually moved to Northern California from Utah. My parents haven't talked to me for 20 years. They're Mormon, so being a transgender lesbian is probably a bit much for their delicate conservative ideologies.
Sure.
I first started with, playing video games with Apogee side-scrollers, Commander Keen, Duke Nukem. Then eventually got into RTS games, StarCraft 1, Command & Conquer, Red Alert 1 and 2. And then eventually I discovered MMOs with the original EverQuest and a little game called Horizons Empires of Astaria, now just called Astaria. You may want to follow your direction to your next objective.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map right now trying to figure it out. This is like the worst. This is the worst thing when you play an MMO a little bit and you come back to it like a year later and you're like, oh god, I don't know anything.
It's like, what am I doing? It's fine. So, talking a little bit about City of Heroes. City of Heroes was like the third sort of MMO that I ever picked up, and it was actually because a couple of friends of mine were playing it, and they were like, hey, we have an old account. You want to just use ours? We don't care anymore. We don't play it. We'll just give it to you. And so they sent me the boxes. They gave me the account info, and I just started using the account, and that was how the original Shelly Lightfoot was born.
Okay.
She was actually based on a character that I'd been playing online with a bunch of friends using freeform role-playing chat channels. And this was the first time I'd actually... I'm following you.
I'm map figuring again. It looks like we have to do some zone hopping here.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So, a little bit of context. They've actually said that they're going to reconfigure the early quests in this game to make them more optimal, but that has not yet happened as of time of recording.
Okay.
So you're sort of doing the long trudge of the quests, and the goal here is to get you up through the level 15 quests, which take you to your first dungeons.
Right. So, for some context there, I guess couple of things you touched on. As we had sort of mentioned, Shelly Lightfoot was the name of the character that you played in City of Heroes at the time that we first met. I was playing a character by the name of Mechanism at the time, which is
spelled with a Z.
Spelled with a Z, because I was like 14, so I thought it was cool.
Fair, we were all young.
I thought it was cool. I make no excuses for that. I do take a little bit of pride. I still to this day like folks that I like played that game with a lot will like occasionally message to me and they'll be like, listen, you son of a bitch, like I still can't spell that word to this day because of your freaking character. Like I'll get people to be like, I keep putting a Z in it and then I remember it's wrong and it's your fault. So that's at least I like that people have carried that with them. But we so the group that we were involved in that game, or the sort of the way that we interacted in that game and with that game was via like a role play group. For any future people listening that are not sort of familiar, that's basically the concept of inhabit whatever the world of the game is with your MMO character and kind of it's essentially like I think of it like even though this is sort of backwards to the way the world works, was my interaction with this was like it was like the precursor to D&D, where it's like you get together with your friends, everybody sort of creates their character, and then people sort of write stories and narratives, and you do these kind of exercises in group narrative telling. So that's I think that's sort of all of the context to the City of Heroes stuff. And I obviously there is a ton to unpack, with all of the other facets of your sort of your introduction to your all about me section there.
Yeah, there was a lot of
there's a lot to chew on in that couple of paragraphs.
Where do you want to start?
Well, I think where I would like to start. So obviously, the fact that you are a transgender woman is something that definitely I want to kind of talk to you about and educate myself on your experience. Level sync is effect. Okay. Oh, I have to be alone.
Oh yeah, I think it's a little solo story instance. There you go. Try it now.
Okay, let's see what happens.
I'm gonna be off screen for a little bit.
Okay. I completely lost my train of thought there.
Transgender issues.
Was definitely something I knew I wanted to talk about. And I think where I want to, I was saying this a little bit before we started, but it was one of the things that before I had started this doing any of these recordings or even really thought about this sort of series, there was something that I had thought about a lot over the past 15 years, and had always been like, man, I should really have a conversation with Shelly about this, because I feel like I should share this, and so that was actually kind of a little bit of the seed of this whole
the impetus.
This whole thing was this concept of man, I've had this this thing that really, why wouldn't I have shared this, in any of the years beyond this? And it's because I am, I could do a better job of engaging on a more real level with my friends. And
you were also a kid and you weren't sure what you were dealing with yet.
Well, I mean, so the weird thing is, I have, and this is sort of the meat of this, is I have always considered the way in which we met and became friends to have been like massively influential in the fact that like you know, at a time when I was, you know, younger and growing up in kind of a, you know, more of a rural area, and I have definitely known people, you know, in my, you know, who came from the same sort of area of upbringing as I, who have like, you know, have a kind of a closed mind to, you know, issues of you know, acceptance of transgender people, and that was never something that I struggled with, and I have long like owed that to sort of you and I becoming friends the way we did through City of Heroes, and sort of the thought that I've always had is like we were friends for like probably like 3 years before I like even became aware. It was like when we became Facebook friends that I like became aware that you were a transgender woman.
Mm-hmm.
So like I knew you for 3 years, just like you were just Shelly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you presented yourself to me as Shelly, as you know, you said I'm Shelly. You're the pronouns that you use are she her, right? And like so all of the like other, you know, stuff that might surround like, you know, meeting a transgender person and you know, having to figure out the, you know, navigate like, oh, you know, what are the proper pronouns, what's, you know, all of that stuff like was just non-existent, right? Like we just played City of Heroes together and we were friends, and like you were just Shelly, and so like
really that's how it should be.
right, and I've, you know, I've always been super grateful for that experience, because, you know, when we did become Facebook friends years later, and I like, you know, was like looking at your Facebook page or whatever, and whether it was something you posted or whatever, I remember the moment being like, oh, Shelly's a transgender woman,
Mm-hmm.
and I like my brain was like, okay. And it was just like this one little, like, okay, well, here's a new little detail that I know about Shelly, but I already had such a like just a huge base of like experience in like playing games with you and like talking and everything else, that it like it didn't really change anything for me.
You got to know me as a person,
right?
First.
That's one of the things I've always been like super grateful to, you know, the experience of gaming, you know, online gaming, and like, to my knowledge anyway, I mean, I could certainly be wrong, but like to my knowledge, you were the first transgender person that I ever encountered in my life, or at least, you know, or at least like
the first one that was like open about it.
Right. Yeah. At least the first transgender person that I encountered that I like was conscious of the fact that, you know, you were like an open transgender person. And, you know, I've had like conversations in my life with people who like that's a struggle for them, because it's like this thing they have to wrap their head around or something. I think I'm done with whatever I was doing in there.
Yeah. It can be dangerous sometimes to out yourself depending on what your life situation is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in an unaccepting family or in an unaccepting part of the country, it could be dangerous to your health.
Of course.
Yeah. But, you know, I was always just, you know, for the context of anyone listening, it's like, you know, Shelly's not my actual name, but it's like, it's good enough because it's like, it's what we were comfortable calling each other. My actual name never really became important until it's like, oh, hey, Facebook page. Right. There it is.
So it was just, it was something I have thought about that like a number of times over, you know, over the course of the last 15 years, over the course of my life, of like, man, I really feel lucky that I had the experience of like being friends with Shelly in, you know, in City of Heroes. And then like the sort of the you know, the first time I in my life had to be confronted with like, this is a transgender person, like how are you going to react to that? It was like it was just, like nothing. Like, well, this is my friend. Like nothing I know about, this person is different.
And that's how it should
like,
be.
yeah, and I've always been super super grateful for that, and it's like an experience that I would, I would hope that, like, I mean, there's a lot of text here. I hope none of this is important because I'm not reading it.
You're not missing a whole lot, trust me.
It's all right. Now where are we going?
Check your map.
Looking at my map,
your quest log and your map.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I've had a couple of other experiences. Gaming online with with people that I would later learn are transgender, but I think in your case it was like it wasn't even something that ever like needed to be on the radar. But you're kind of mentioning it can be dangerous, and I do remember another online experience I had with somebody where I played when the Knights of the Old Republic game came out. I played
Star Wars KOTOR or
yes,
Star Wars Tour.
Yes. I played with a group there, and there was one person in the group for months and months. Played a female character, used she/her pronouns, all that stuff. Did not communicate in voice chat on like I don't remember what program it was we were using that time. I think that's still pre-Discord.
Probably Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or something.
Something like that. Used like a text-to-speech thing, right? And sort of always kind of said like, like my mic is broken, my mic doesn't work.
And I'll bet that's not even true. They were more just scared,
right? And because what ended up actually happening eventually is, after probably 8 months, don't
forget to get the right
this thing.
Yeah.
They came to me and they like sent me like a direct message privately of like, hey, it's been they pulled me aside after, and they had this thing prepared where she sent like, hey, it's been long enough now, like we played together a lot, I'm really like nervous to like have this conversation, but I can't, like, I don't want to keep, like, I feel like I'm being dishonest with you, and basically opened up to me and said like, I am in the process of transitioning from male to female, and I'm just starting my like voice therapy and like hormones and stuff, so I was afraid of speaking in the voice chat, and like and followed it up with this thing of like, if you don't want to like game with me anymore or be my friend or whatever, like, I understand, but I have to be like honest. And I was like, it broke my heart a little bit that like this friend that I had been playing with for months and months would even have to worry that like they were gonna be honest with me about who they were, and that I would like reject that and not and like not want to be their friend anymore.
Some trans women killed,
and I've since come to learn a lot more about that, and it's just such a like it's heartbreaking to like think about that reality for people.
Particularly if they're a trans woman of color, they're especially at risk. And just for the background of the trans side of this particular issue, what a lot of times happens is people feel like they're being lied to, or that trans people are trying to be sneaky, or they're trying to invade someone else's space. When in reality, it's a question of the opposite. It's not a lie, it's a truth. They're trying to be true to themselves, but a lot of other people aren't really ready for that.
Right.
There's still like 2 or 3 states in the United States where it is illegal for us to use the bathroom in public spaces because of this feeling that, oh, well, you're an invader in, the women's bathroom. So, Texas, South Dakota, South Carolina, I'm not going there.
Right. I I guess I wonder, like, this is probably like a terrible analogy, but I almost think like I know, as like a gamer and as like a giant dorkator, and like I play D&D, and I do like I feel I get nervous telling people that like I play Dungeons and Dragons, and that's like nothing, right? Like that's it's I can't imagine how like how much more like terrifying and uncertain it must be, to this concept of like, because you mentioned something about like people think that like trans people are trying to be sneaky or whatever it is, when it's like realistically it's just trying to like be honest about an aspect of themselves. And it's like I feel like on some level, and I certainly don't hope to come off as if I'm equating it, but like at some level everybody should be able to like at least find some place in their heart where they like they can recognize that it can be like a little like it can be scary to like reveal something about yourself that like maybe you're afraid somebody might not accept, and then like times that by like a billion when you consider how poorly people can react to to something like, well, this
Especially in
this is
video
my
games.
gender.
Especially in video games, it's like I still to this day generally if I'm surrounded by a bunch of strangers in a video game like an MMO, I'm not going to tell them stuff like that.
Sure.
It's bad enough just being a person who is a woman in a video game, because there's still this toxic idea that it's like, oh well, everyone in a video game is a guy, so if you're actually a girl,
Right.
you hide that because then you get harassed. Now add being a lesbian, now add being trans, and it just you start to compound the problems.
Right. Now, is that something? So, I mean, obviously, you mentioned, when you're starting this, your family sort of, was never able to reconcile themselves with, with becoming, more open minded. Do you find that the online space is more open minded, more accepting, more than like, is the experience better online or better like in the is the real world better, is the online world better, is it a factor of like you can kind of you have more of a choice of what you share online, so you can kind of
you can start
what I
to
mean?
pick and choose and create boundaries. You can say, okay, I'm going to create a space like a Discord server and say, okay, this is a space where people that I know who are not toxic, transphobic douches can be a part of my server. And then I have created essentially, a space that is safe for me to exist in. And venturing into new groups with people I don't know is always scary, and I generally avoid talking about it until I'm certain that I can trust people.
Right.
Sometimes even just having a political opinion can be toxic,
Right.
because everybody's just like, oh well, things you don't talk about on the internet are, religion and politics. Don't
Sure.
talk about these things. Don't talk about them ever.
That seems to be like, I've been thinking about that more and more about, as like um a mindset that I equate with a time when the internet was less integral to everybody's life than it is now. Because nowadays it's like, oh, don't talk about politics and religion on the internet or whatever. But it's like, then where do you talk about it? Like, that's where discourse happens now.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there, because the internet is oftentimes a reflection of the real world. And if people try and pretend it's otherwise, I'm like, I'm sorry, you haven't looked at some parts of the internet where these things are actually, they're getting discussed more online than in the real world. The difference is the distance between people is eliminated on the internet.
Mm.
That's the only difference. Now it's like you could be talking about politics or religion or anything else. The only difference is they're on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast.
You mentioned you came out as a transgender woman
Hmm.
around 17, 18, but you said you had known earlier than that.
Hmm.
What was that process like of I assume there was there was a point where you kind of, you know, you kind of knew like, oh, the like something is not is not matching up. I'm not like I feel, different
Something doesn't
than the
quite
physical
jive.
body that I'm in. What was that process like, and I guess like when did it start, and what's the journey from sort of the first kind of inklings to understanding yourself, and coming to like a fully realized
Well,
concept of who
first off,
you are.
first of all, it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody self-actualizes and self-realizes stuff at a slightly different pace. By the way, check and make sure you have the ether right over here. So, for me, what happened was the feeling was there, but because I didn't have a word for it, I didn't have a name for it, and I had a hard time describing it.
Hmm.
In the latter end of high school, I had a creative writing teacher. Just make sure you have this one.
I think I do.
Okay, then we'll head back down.
Assuming just like clicking on it will add it to your thing if you don't have it.
Yep, exactly
Okay.
that. That's all you need to do.
Creative writing teacher.
I had a creative writing teacher, and her name was Carol Sawaya. And Miss Sawaya was teaching us, how to, think critically, put thoughts down on paper in such a way that you could express yourself and try and understand how you feel, sort of self-actualization.
Hmm.
And the more I started to write some things down, the more this teacher was like, you may actually want to go and like do some reading on this because I sort of feel like there's a bit more here.
Okay.
And so I actually went to my local library, which, fortunately Salt Lake it has a very nice public library system. And I started checking out books on the topic.
And
And
how old are you
eventually,
at this point?
I mean, we're talking late high school,
Okay.
so 15, 16.
Okay.
And I eventually found this book. It was called True Selves: Understanding Transsexualism for Families, Friends, Coworkers, and Helping Professionals by a doctor named Mildred L. Brown. This particular book was sort of a revelation for me because I started seeing, oh, 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 I am all of these things. And I eventually bought a copy of the book for myself so I could sit there and underline all of the paragraphs that seemed to describe me. The other thing I started doing is I started seeing a counselor, started seeing a therapist.
Hmm.
This was a hit and miss process because the first thing was my folks sent me to a Mormon therapist
Mm,
who was trying to push conversion therapy,
right.
trying to get the queer out of you. This was a very toxic and bad experience because this guy was essentially doing things like threatening to kill you in an attempt to get you to stop doing the queer thing.
And
Not a fun time.
what? I guess this is almost like an ask stupid questions, get stupid answers. What could possibly be the thought process behind thinking that would help somebody? Like,
It's a psychology thing, reverse psychology, or trying to create, hey, this is a bad thing, you shouldn't do this. I'm going to like try to scare them. Problem is, when you're a 15, 16-year-old kid, that's traumatizing.
Sure, of course.
Nowadays, like in many states in the United States, conversion therapy is banned because it really messes people up. It's very unhealthy, and it often leads to people with incredibly low self-esteem, suicide issues. You've already got this one. We checked it earlier.
Yes, I do.
Actually, I remember we were going to go see Papa Sean. I actually forgot what we were doing.
We gotta go. Looks like that way.
Papa Sean should be over.
Looks like he's to the east.
The east?
The marker it's giving me is right near something that's marked the clutch.
Ah. So he is not over by the mines right now. He's over by your next big story event.
Oh, fun.
You're going to have a fight. Get ready to fist some things.
Okay.
All right, somewhere around here-ish.
I have a golden thing on the ground that says destination.
Ah, click that.
Here I am.
You may need me to not be in the party. Boom.
So you were saying you had
Once I
you went
started
to a Mormon conversion therapy pushing person first.
Yeah,
Right,
then
you
I
left
actually
off.
saw an actual therapist after that, and
Okay.
they were a lot more healthy for me.
Sure.
So a good therapist is not going to try and push an agenda on you.
Right.
A good therapist will try to help you figure out your path and your destiny, not push one on you.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, through the discussions with the good therapist, I eventually did come to the conclusion that I needed to come out, or I was probably going to kill myself. I was having severe suicide issues.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because of the whole Mormonism problem. The two were not gelling.
Right.
Plus, the family really wanted me to be going to church, and more I was starting to realize, yeah, the whole church thing, that's not good for me either. It's actively destroying my own self-esteem and my mental health. I need to get away from this. And so I started by not going, and that was what really started to set my folks off.
Right. Is religion something you ever came back to, or you kind of have discovered like it's not, like there's not a place for it?
I think
within
I'm
you?
more of a Wiccan or a pagan now.
Okay. I think I did know that. 'Cause as soon as you
okay.
said it, I was like, oh yeah, I think I remember talking about that like years and years ago.
It's okay. It's been a while.
Yeah, and as I understand it, and again, this is from the perspective of somebody who only has sort of the most passing knowledge of these things. A lot of that seems to be focused a lot more on like self-actualization and self-empowerment type of like. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if ritualistic stuff is the right word.
Religion in itself is entirely ritualistic.
I guess that's I guess that's true. That's sort of the sense that I always got from any like discussion I've had with somebody who either considers themselves a Wiccan or a pagan, or I have a good friend who's kind of says, well, I don't necessarily subscribe to those labels, but some of the sort of the general feel. And I mean, that's certainly, I can see why that would be man, I'm doing any damage to this guy. I'll kill somebody else first. I'll come back and punch him later.
Yeah.
Certainly seems healthy, the finding something of like, okay, I'm gonna find this thing that, the purpose is to help me find what is you
They
know,
have a
what
core
brings me
rule.
peace, or whatever you want to call it.
They have this core tenet. Uh, as long as you're not hurting anyone, do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of was like, yes, that is a good core rule. I like this. Because at
Right.
the moment you're hurting someone else, that is when a thing becomes bad. When I looked at it through that point of view, from that core tenet, things started to make a lot more sense to me.
Right.
It's like, okay, this feels better. This is much more me.
Um, I definitely get the sense, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe this is sort of just your, your particular mannerisms. But I definitely get the sense that there is certainly some anger there.
Yeah.
In I think you've a couple of times you've used some sort of colorful descriptors for closed-minded people or people with sort of certain belief systems that understandably so, obviously, is that
The phrase I believe I originally used was delicate conservative ideologies in a sarcastic tone.
I think dickbags got said at some point as well. That was what I was sort of remembering. There was, I think, dickbag got thrown in there somewhere or something of that nature. I mean, understandably so. I would say, is that sort of a kind of a struggle of having to kind of wrestle with this?
It's a little more than that
in there.
because they actively eventually decided, when I was not going to church and I was deciding to pursue coming out instead of going back and hiding in a nice little hole, they decided that the thing to do was to throw me out on my ass.
Right.
And I was 18 at the time. They very soon, basically just as soon as they were legally able to.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few years of being on the street. There was a few years of being picked up and adopted by somebody who then became physically abusive, getting away from that. And that was largely how I wound up moving to a state that was more accepting and more protective of someone in my situation. That's how I ended up in Northern California.
Okay. Is you said you haven't like spoken to your parents, your family in 20 years now. Is that something you'd ever hope they'll eventually come around and there'd be like a reconciliation, or are you kind of have you sort of had to put yourself in the place where you just have to kind of move on from that? I guess
I always hope that people will come around. I always hope that people will come to their senses or try and make a reconciliation, but that almost never happens.
Sure.
Generally, people tend to be very stuck in their ways. People tend to, when they see something that doesn't agree with their preconceptions for reality, they don't like their reality being upturned. They don't like somebody spilling the apple cart.
Right.
People don't like change. So, my parents would they would much rather be more concerned about their relationship with God than with their own children.
Right.
Now, this is not all parents thing. This was
of
just
course.
parents. There are many parents who actually don't think that way, that are actually really good to their kids. If anything, I would want parents to try and be good to their kids and try and communicate with them more, try to understand them more, try to put love above God.
Right.
Because, depending on your ideology, some would say God is love.
Of course.
But my parents did not make that choice.
Sure.
They went the other way. And so, yes, there's some bitterness there.
I mean, you almost can't can't imagine they're not being. You'd almost have to be like some kind of saint to not have have something carried with you. But
I try to live the best life I can, but it's
I
like I also understand reality, and
sure.
eventually you just have to accept things and move on.
I mean, it does. It certainly seems like you're able to kind of throw a colorful comment in there, but but otherwise it seems like you've kind of found a positive mental state, mental place to be, which is good.
You have to.
Of course.
If you don't, you just go further and further down the hole, and finding that sort of inner peace is never easy for anybody.
Sure.
It's just dealing with trauma,
Right. Do you have? I guess is there? So, I keep catching myself like thinking too much like an interview, like I'm the words like what would you want to tell someone listening, almost came out of my mouth, and I stopped myself because this not
isn't an interview. This is supposed
it's not
to be
an interview.
getting
This is getting to know you. As that was about to come out of my mouth, I stopped myself, and the way that I would rather rephrase that is like me, right? I am cisgendered heterosexual white man. I'm
married.
I'm married. I'm the default like the like you haven't changed any of the character sliders on your video game person, right? So like I have largely I consider like I have I think I'm out of the instance area. Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
Where like my experience with life, regardless of sort of the struggles that I think everybody has, is like I feel like I've generally been on like easy mode, right? Like nobody hates me because of what I look like. Nobody is like drawing moral lines in the sand against who I am as a person. So the thing that I want to take away from this, or I want to like open up the conversation, is like I guess like you to me, like what would you give it, and as I give you the opportunity right now of like lay it on me, like what do you want me to like understand about you as a person and about your life and your experience that I can hope to internalize in the best way that I can, and and take that forward to make me a better person as I interact with other people in the world, and and hopefully can gain a better understanding of of what their experiences might be.
Something happened this morning that is very relevant to this discussion. This morning, the Supreme Court handed down a ruling that says that LGBTQ workers are covered under protections in the law. Now, this is significant for two reasons. First of all, it was a conservative Supreme Court that handed down this decision.
Right.
So apparently, both the left and the right think this was a thing that needed to exist, even if our current president does not.
Right.
The other thing is, it shows that society is in a point right now where it is slowly moving forward and evolving on these issues. A few years ago, gay marriage was made legal. Now the Supreme Court says LGBTQ people deserve protections at the workplace. The next thing is going to be protecting LGBTQ people in like healthcare. When you try and engage with these sort of issues, remember a couple of things up front. The first lesson that you learned was we're people first and foremost.
Right.
We're not our classifications or categories. As soon as you start to try and categorize people, human beings as a nature will always try and categorize things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that people do. People are all about their tribes. Try not to tribe people. Try not to put them in categories or in boxes. People are people. Start from that basis. You as a person, you have these interests. We do these things together. I know you from, these are how you get to know a person.
Right.
They're, as soon as you, and I don't want to say that you're bad for trying to come at this whole conversation from the point of view of you are a transgender person. It's like, yes, that's true. But your advantage is you came at this from the point of view of you were a person first. Always try to come at that point of view. They are a person first. All those other things come second.
Okay.
And if you have a family, if you have, if you end up being a parent, listen to those kids. Love above God.
I think very succinctly put. And unless there is anything else that you think would have been beneficial for me to have like picked your brain about, or that you feel you wanted to hit kind of on that issue, I think on the kind of the note of approaching this from a people first standpoint, I think I do want to start talking about some video games and stuff like that.
Hit it. Hit it.
Okay, well, cool. So
games.
This concludes the soppy, weird. I try not to be
serious portion.
I try not to be offensive portion of our recording, and now we're going to talk about punching monsters.
Fisting ants.
I don't. Speaking of monsters, where are we on the map right now? Because
You're the one.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're going back to the city. I am sort of going in the right direction.
Okay. Time to get the chocobo back out.
Is that the auto run? Okay. I'll get on the.
Or just hop on.
I'll get on the chicken. Okay. Woohoo! So, ow, Jesus.
You okay?
Yeah, I just funny boned myself. You mentioned sort of right in the beginning a bunch of video games that I have not heard of because I did not discover the world of video games until I was given an N64 for Christmas, and then played that pretty much until. All right, where's my quest marker now? Played that pretty much until. Oh, I gotta talk to the person again. Yeah, okay.
Probably Momodi, who's in the Adventurers Guild, if I'm not mistaken.
It's Papa Sean again. I gotta go
Papa
back.
Sean?
Yeah, I gotta go back up to where we were before. So we're in the wrong part of the city, first of all.
Check your map.
Yeah, they're where they were before. Up in that, like, way up at the top.
If you come over here to the crystal.
To the crystal.
If they're up there by where we were originally, that's up by the Alchemist Guild.
Alchemist Guild, I got that one.
Yeah.
Nice. So what was your? I think you said it, but I didn't write it down because I wasn't. I had to change pens halfway through. I was like writing some things that I wanted to come back to, and I missed some things. I think you did mention like what your first game was.
Commander Keen.
Keen. Okay, so that's like, that's old school as shit. You're talking about like text command, like.
Not text. This was it was 2D platformers.
Okay.
So basically, it was the screen resolution was really piss poor, and you're basically jumping on blocks and jumping on monsters. and sometimes you have a little ray gun and you can shoot aliens. This was done by a small company called Apogee. Apogee also did a couple of other games. There's also connected to another company which you may have heard of called id Software.
Okay, that name I
Who
know.
created titles like, say, Duke Nukem or
Yep.
Doom. I remember I was actually in middle school and I had a gaming magazine, and there was this full page ad for, you want to have a fun summer? Go to hell, because it's Doom. And, there was also this title called Wolfenstein
Mm-hmm.
3D. Ooh, it's in 3D. We are still using 16-bit color. Ooh.
So were you? This is the era before really the the social aspect via the internet of like games had really taken off, but
It's
I
sort
know
of where
back in
it's
the
the
early days,
genesis, the start of it,
yeah, there was like kind of because it sort of used to be like sort of forum uh interaction was sort of like the almost the precursor to like role playing stuff, at least
Don't
in
forget
my
MUDs.
experience. Muds, yes.
Yes, MUDs.
I played a few muds in my day. Were When did you sort of start getting like what's your first experience with sort of the social uh the social experience of like making friends via like the computer and the internet?
Fast forward a couple of years, I'm living in Northern California. I actually have to, because, I needed a time when I was no longer living on the street. I actually had stable internet access and a computer that I had access to.
Right.
So by this point, it's like 2000, 2001 or so. I'm about 20 years old. And I start exploring, there was a little bit of an EverQuest era before this. And one day, a friend of mine comes over and says, hey, you want to try out this new game? It's an MMO. I'm like, what the hell's that? And eventually it's like, oh, it's like EverQuest. Got it. I did a little bit of that, and this one was like Horizons Empires of Astaria. And it was a lot more graphically intensive. It
Mm-hmm.
chugged the computer really badly because it was poorly optimized. But it's like that's when I first started to really make friends that I would still keep to this day, because a lot of the stuff from EverQuest, I had like a really negative experience, and I don't hang out with those people anymore because a lot of those relationships turned toxic and became very bad as soon as they found out who and what I was.
Mm.
So the first relationships that stayed, where there were some good ones, was on Astaria, because I happened to meet some decent folks. I always try to start from the role playing side of things because I enjoy that, and it's
Mm-hmm.
usually a sort of a nice launching point, and then you start to get to know people
Right.
once you already have a friendship established.
For you, what is it about? Because that's another thing that like I don't even bother to try and like explain to my like non gaming friends. Like my wife only has the vaguest understanding of like the role play aspect of playing an MMO.
It's a lot like Dungeons and Dragons, because it's like you're trying to put yourself into a character,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the only difference is it's without the pen and paper.
Yeah. What is it for you that draws you to, um, role play? Is it the creative outlet of being able to tell stories? Is it the the social aspect? Like what's your kind of thing?
Escapism.
Escape,
Because
imagination.
yeah, when you live in a society that is actively demonizing you, actively trying to take your rights away constantly. You really need an outlet. You really need some place where you can, just be somebody else for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
to try and take the steam off, to try and take the pressure off the boiler. Because otherwise, I would just be either eternally depressed or eternally just in a state of righteous fury.
Right.
So you need that. Just take the pot off the boiler for a little while. Be somebody else. Be, the elf ranger. Be the
Mm-hmm.
superhero. Be the little kitsune who goes around and chops things up with a sword. Take your pick.
Right.
You could be anything else for a little while. Go be something else for a little while.
Do you do like, what's your sort of like creative outlet outside of like outside of like gaming and role playing and stuff? Do you do any like writing? Do you do stuff that's
Fiction.
fashion, you said?
Fan fiction.
Oh, fan fiction. The mic cut out and I thought you went fashion. I was like, oh.
I mean, there's some of that too. I mean, fashion is the end game of any good MMO.
That's why City of Heroes was always my favorite, because it has the best. It had bought like far and away the best character creator and like customization
Of
options
the
of anything I've
time.
ever played of the time, of any. But
I
you
mean-
know that I had ever played, and I think that I've ever played since, but I haven't played an enormous amount of.
You haven't played
MMOs.
everything. There
I
are a
have not
few
played
things
everything.
I think that get close, but that's totally an aside. The end game of any good MMO is Final Fashion 14.
Yeah.
World of Fashion. Take your pick. It's all about looking good, and looking good is big.
Right.
Whereas you're sitting here going around in toad leather with unmatching pants, and I'm over here in the nice dress.
I
It's
do
sort of-
have.
this is the comparison right here.
I
I
do have
kind of I
striped
want to
pirate
craft you
pants
an
on.
outfit that looks better.
It's real bad. I realized my guy's eyes aren't the same color, which I assume is a choice I made intentionally when I made him, but I don't remember doing that.
It is a thing you can do in games. Supposedly the aura, which is what you're playing, tend to have a lot of mismatched eyes, and so do the Makote,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I'm playing. Specifically, you are a rain aura. They tend to have the white horns, and they come from an area of Doma, which is the Far East in this game. And they tend to live in underwater cities.
Oh.
They're a very peaceful society because they came from another society of Aura with black horns called the Zayla, who were very warlike. And the Rain were like, nah, we're not about that. We want to just chill. So they had their underwater cities and became a very peaceful people. Wanted to be left alone.
They're not the Gungans of Final Fantasy, are they?
No.
Oh, thank God.
No.
I was like, well, I have to delete this character.
No, they will fight if they need to.
What are you playing? Are you playing pretty much all MMOs? You playing anything besides MMOs? That's your jam currently?
I've been going around doing a number of things of late. Being cooped up inside because of COVID isn't helping.
Mm.
In terms of MMOs, there's 14. There's PSO2 currently. There's a little bit of ESO, but for me, playing an MMO is all about having friends to hang out with. If I don't have any friends to hang out with, what's the point?
Right.
Some other games that I've been playing, Monster Hunter World.
Mm-hmm.
The new Command and Conquer Remastered, which is those first Command and Conquer games from back in the 90s. Two of them got remastered, which is a sign of EA, I think, actually trying to do something good for a change. So that's actually pretty good. Occasionally I'll pop over to Guild Wars 2, I actually still have my original Astaria account, even though that game is so ancient. Borderlands 3 is a thing that exists.
Oh yeah.
I have a copy of that.
I played that. I did finish it. But I think we were talking about the other day. That was there was like a summer in whatever year it came out where you and I don't think I've spoken to him or heard anything hide or hair of him in years. Our friend Jack played the original Borderlands every night until like 4 a.m. for like a month. And he refused, and I remember this because for some reason he refused to go in the car. He insisted that he only would run everywhere on foot. And I remember that to this day, that it was like we just spent a bunch of time where we'd like go to wherever the next checkpoint is, and we were like, all right, now we gotta wait for Jack because he's fucking running from wherever we were.
Which is problematic because there are some areas in those games where you can only get to them by doing a jump with the vehicle over a bridge that's blown out and you can't walk over it. It's like, okay, these situations you have to be in the car, Jack. I haven't heard hide nor hair of Jack in a long time. But yeah, not long after Borderlands 1, there was Borderlands 2. I made so many characters in that game.
I don't think I've ever played. That's one thing I'm not good at, and it's one of the reasons I think I struggle with MMOs unless I have a really strong base of like friends to play with. Is like I'm not good at replayability of stuff. I'm not good at things that like are kind of repetitive. Like all the Borderlands, I played it through one time with the one character, and like that was it. There's very few select games I've ever played that I've really like been able to play through. Like the Mass Effect series was always like that for me. I've played that, half a dozen times probably. The original Knights of the Old Republic RPG, and then KOTOR 2. I've played.
Didn't enjoy the second one.
I have like weird mixed memories because I just went back and replayed the second one, and I was like, this is not what I remembered from this game. I feel like this is different. I definitely don't think it was as good.
Oh, it definitely was not. Also,
it's my hot take on a 15-year-old game or whatever it is.
It was unfinished. I know some people have been trying to like finish some of the bits of it. Maybe that had a contributing effect. I don't know.
Could be. And my recent playthrough, I got like 20 hours into the game, and then I had some sort of a weird glitch where like my character got replaced with one of the companion characters as like my main character. So then I just ended up back on my ship where like it was me as Atten Rand standing next to Atten Rand, and I was like, well, cool, KOTOR, I guess I'll just be Atten now. But like because I was Atten, I couldn't like progress in any of the story because you need the main character to like talk to people. So I was like, all right, cool, my save's borked, and that was the end of that.
Oh no. Oh boy.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to ask me?
Well, I guess I was kind of talked a bunch about video games. We talked obviously a bunch about all sorts of like personal stuff and everything like that. I guess so you're my knowledge of your like career life has basically been through now we got spaceships going on here. Oh, this is a whole different thing. Sorry, I'm getting
okay. Yeah, this is that cutscene where you're talking to a whole bunch of like enemies.
My tracking of your not tracking is it's just sort of been like it passively as it comes past my like Facebook feed has seemed to be a bunch of frustration with the tech industry is not the right word. Um,
Frustrations with employment in general.
yes, I'm trying to think of
Sure,
like.
that was what the whole ruling today from the Supreme Court was all about.
Sure.
Protecting LGBT people in the workplace, because, you know, as much as I do prefer to be in a place of employment that is long-term and stable, it's really easy for an LGBTQ person to be gotten rid of for even the smallest infraction, and they don't even have to give you a reason. Now, a lot of times those reasons are, quite frankly, bullshit. But they're not going to say that.
Right.
Today's ruling makes it essentially a federal crime to get rid of someone for reasons like, well, because they're filthy queer, we don't want them around. Can't do
Right.
that anymore. It's against the law, essentially, via the Supreme Court. A long time ago, we as a community, the LGBTQ community, were trying to push something called ENDA, which is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. We were trying to get it through Congress. If anybody's curious, just look it up on Wikipedia. There were year after year trying to get it through Congress, and Congress would not budge. There was even a point where they tried throwing trans people under the bus to try and see if they could get it passed. Trust me, trans people did not take kindly to this. It still didn't pass, and now the Supreme Court is like, this is a thing that should exist.
Mm-hmm.
Not the way we would have preferred to have done it, but hey, one step forward is better than 5 steps backwards, so
Sure.
hey, we'll take it.
Now, this is because I was reading about this earlier today, and it seems like it is undoubtedly a good thing. But this comes hot on the heels of just like a couple of days ago, like something. They removed they finalized their bill on removing protections or removing like medical
All right,
support for transgender people, right? This and
let me
these two
help
things
you
have
out.
nothing to do with each other.
Let me help you out a little bit here. What happened was essentially President Trump and the Trump administration were rolling back an Obama-era rule saying, hey, you can't discriminate against these people in healthcare.
Right.
And Trump, who's basically hates the black man because racism and is determined to reverse everything that Obama ever did, rolled it back.
Right.
So now it is legal if I'm dying of a heart attack and get taken to a hospital, to essentially say, nah, I don't want to.
Doctor can say, I don't believe in that, so I'm not going to treat this person. Essentially,
I'm not going to save the life of this trans person. Or,
right.
say, for example, you have 2 lesbians, and one lesbian is in labor from pregnancy. Well, the other lesbian may be denied the ability to be with her wife, even though she has a legal piece of paper that says she's married to this person. The doctors can deny that. So that's what I meant by 4 or 5 steps backwards, 1 step forward.
What a bizarre... I mean, I guess I will never understand politics unless I devote way more time, but it seems so like what the hell is going on, right? That within 2-3 days these two things both happen, and they're complete polar opposites. It's are we getting our shit together, or are we not getting our shit together? I guess from the from the outside looking in, and
okay, so there are 2 basic factions in American politics. They call them the left or the right.
Yeah.
And basically, people on the left, and imagine I'm using massive air quotes in the air when I say the left, believe we should move forward, make things better for people, try not to be a dick to people, stuff like that. And the right is, we are all about God, the military, religion. We want to go back to the way things used to be. We don't like going forward. Let's just stay where we are. So those two factions, for most of American history, have been able to just sort of, they fight a lot, but eventually, things get done. In recent years, however, that whole system has started to fall apart. Everyone is too busy arguing about semantics and details, and nothing is getting done. Obama tried really hard to push through some progressive policies, progressive, again, in air quotes, because, okay, so here's a fun fact. The healthcare plan that Obama pushed out, everyone calls it Obamacare, but you know what it originally was called? Romney Care, which was a conservative plan, because it threw a whole bunch of money at healthcare systems, and it's like, hey, if these healthcare systems will play ball, we'll give you a whole bunch of new customers. Well, then, even though it was a conservative plan, they immediately started undermining it by removing key tenets, and now these days it's all starting to fall apart.
Right.
I implied earlier that Trump is doing things because he just hates the black man, and that seems to be a lot of what motivates him. He only cares about himself. It's essentially, it's make me, Donald Trump, look good, or I'm going to hurt you in any way I can.
I always got the impression that with him it was like deep down, I think he thinks either he thinks or he knows that oh, this is a person who is, by pretty much any standard that anybody measures by, is considered to have been a better president, a better person, more respected. And I've always got the impression that it's just he just cannot handle the fact that deep down he knows that he's not doing a good job, regardless of how deluded he would let himself believe, and so it's just this, he's like a toddler just lashing out.
There is an awful lot of that. He's called the man baby for a good reason. He's bound and determined to try and he wants to be remembered as a better president, but in reality he's doing it by essentially climbing over little people, whereas Obama was trying to help little people. So it's sort of this basic misunderstanding of why this person was a great man. And I think Obama could have done a lot of things better.
Sure.
Look at that list of the number of times the Employment Non-Discrimination Act failed to go through. Thanks, Obama. But Trump is decidedly not better than that. Obama was a better president, and this guy is just absolutely doesn't like the fact that, oh, the black man was better than me, so of course, I'm using hyperbole. I'm being, of course, very vitriolic.
He does I don't think, I never felt like he kind of had it all together to begin with, but boy, it seems like he's really coming unhinged these last couple of months.
Yeah,
I guess things just falling apart. I don't know. I mean, I'm concerned enough about another 4 years of the Trump administration. It's got to be a way scarier thought, possibility for the LGBTQ LGBTQ community. Yes, LGBTQ community.
Yeah, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and queer questioning. So let me clear up two things really quick. First of all, everyone is just well, now there's more letters. It's confusing. Okay. The whole LGBT thing is an umbrella term intended to encompass a whole bunch of different groups. Sometimes we recognize new letters, but eventually we came to a point where it's like LGBTQIAA, and it just started to go a little crazy. So it's just like, you know what? We're just going to call it LGBT, or LGBT plus, LGBTQ.
Sure.
But it still encompasses all of the different subgroups, and they are all equally important and as valid. And because humans are infinitely complicated, there are as many different sexual orientations and gender identities as there are people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just our community either that is vulnerable from Republican presidents. It's also Black folks, Latinos, Muslims, anybody who is not your, classic cisgender, heterosexual white man, straight white man, is considered vulnerable and at risk when Republicans are in power. And when people vote Republican, they are contributing to this, because voting is the one power that we have. And a lot of people either choose to not vote, which aids in Republican success, or vote for people like Donald Trump because, oh, I know that name. I don't know this other name.
Right.
And unfortunately, the only way to really deal with this appropriately as sort of an outsider looking in like yourself is, unfortunately, either do the research or ask someone you know.
Right.
Someone like me. Now, I'm going to come right out and say I don't like Joe Biden. I think he's not a great person, and sometimes he just should shut up and stop digging. But he's better than the alternative. And though I am a very left-wing, Bernie supporting, socialist-y type person, I'm still going to be like, we still have to live in this society. Mm-hmm. And the best bet for the safety of people like me, or even people who don't look like me, who live in this country, is to probably not vote for another 4 years of the Trump administration. Now, Unfortunately, this sort of dates this recording because somebody coming along a year or so later will know how the election ends.
Right.
So I
or like we'll all be dead because the world will have exploded and fallen into chaos, and it'll just sort of be like a Mad Max situation. We're all just like,
will be fine. It's the human race that we should worry about. Considering climate change is a thing that is real.
Oh boy.
Unfortunately, the future is sort of being created around us, and even if we try and bury our heads in the sand, it's still going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I hate to use old cliched phrases like, unfortunately, the only way to fix things is to pay attention, is to actually, get to know these issues, actually talk to these people, actually get to know them, actually find out what their stories are. Mm-hmm. But that really is the way to sort of understand these things.
Do you feel like that is becoming more common or less so nowadays?
It really depends on who you talk to. Unfortunately, I think the internet is somewhat responsible for this because it has brought people closer together and they can talk more about these things. Mm-hmm. But it has also created a situation where it's like, now we're closer together, more able to communicate, and oh my goodness, are there some slimy worms crawling around in the underbellies of the society. And they're all trying to stick their heads up and go, hey, we're still a thing. Racism, Nazis, we still think Nazis are cool. Yeah. you thought the Nazis were gone with World War II. Sorry, no. They just work for the police now.
Surprise, Nazis 2, Electric Boogaloo. I was just talking about that with my brother the other day, where we were saying, like, it's just like absolutely wild that, like, this is still a thing that's happening, and we're talking about, like, when we were younger, when we were kids, it was like Nazis were this thing where, like, yeah, they were these, like, this, like, evil dark thing that happened in the past, and then, like, all the good people stood up and went and shit kicked those guys and did something about it, and now they're like a boogeyman, and at best we use them as, like, the default evil guy. And then fast forward to now, and it's, maybe it's that we just didn't know any better, maybe we weren't being shown, maybe we weren't looking, but, like, fast forward to now, and it's like they're everywhere. And we were saying that, I forget what the context of it was, but we're kind of talking about how, like, our grandfather had fought in one of our grandfathers had fought in World War II, and had won a bunch of medals for essentially, like, charging a machine gun nest by himself and, like, saving his whole squad or something, like, something along those lines. And then my dad said, like, oh, the other grandfather didn't get to go fight Nazis because he had, like, something was wrong with his arm didn't straighten all the way. And we were kind of like, well, give it a couple of more years, the way things have been going, we're all going to get the chance to fight the Nazis again, because it's like, I guess that's
a part of Germany will be played by the United States.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the beauty and the evil of the internet, right? It does bring people together, and it allows people like you and me to to find each other over our love of video games and MMOs and storytelling and role playing and fantasy escapism. But it also allows fucking dirtbags to find each other, right? And they can have their little pockets of the internet. And I
try to convince other people of, like, hey, maybe authoritarianism isn't that bad. And then a lot of people who don't know any better listen.
Yeah. I think it's again a kind of a relic of the beginnings of the internet, where it was sort of this fringe thing, and the adage always used to be, I just heard somebody talking about this on a podcast I was listening to, the old adage for the internet was don't feed the trolls. And there was always this, like, this mentality of, like, yeah, the internet is full of, like, douchebags and scummy people, and just the way that you deal with them is you ignore them, and you don't feed into their bullshit, and you just let them yell themselves hoarse or whatever with their nonsense. And I don't know that works anymore, because I think that now the internet is the real world now. It's not this other thing off to the side. And and everybody playing Don't Feed the Trolls just seems like it just allows the trolls to, like, find each other, and then while we were all busy looking the other way, you turn your head back, and it's like they've formed into, like, a fucking super troll. And a Godzilla-sized troll is stomping towards the city, and nobody's prepared for it. So it's
whenever we ignore them, we feed their success.
Yeah.
There's some really good videos on YouTube about how you should actually combat or handle somebody who's actually being a dirtbag or trying to refute some of the stuff that they're saying. And unfortunately, the answer is no. When you find a dirtbag, either shut them down, silence them, or fight them.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to ignore them just aids their success.
Remember the old adage when we were kids and we were in school? They always told us, if you ignore the bully,
Yep, the bully goes
then
away, or
yeah,
they'll
the
get
bully
bored
goes
with you or
away.
whatever. I
And it
think
was just never true. I still
I
got beat up every time I was walking home from school. It never worked. They just got more and more empowered. The
mhm.
old adage wasn't true.
And I think
You have
it's
to
it's
fight them.
it is weird because it's funny you say that. Like, everybody was, before it was the internet, it was like bullies in real life, right? And they always said, like, if you ignore them, don't let them get a rise out of you. Don't let them get don't give them what they want, and they'll stop. And I don't know that I think any kid anywhere in the world had, like, believed that. Like, everybody knew that that was baloney when
Hmm.
when you were a kid. And it's so weird because that's such a direct correlation to the internet, right? Like, don't ignore the bully, don't feed into them, don't give them what they want, is like, it's the same thing as saying don't feed the trolls. And, like,
Hmm.
we knew it wasn't true when, Ringus, the over, like, early pubescent shin kicker was picking on us. But it's like, I guess somehow, like, collectively the whole like, all of society thought that it would work for don't feed the trolls. And I do get the impression that like mentality is finally changing. Especially, I've seen a lot of that in the last year, couple of years, and, like, really really in the last couple of months, especially as it came to kind of this, there was this almost like this collective, like, rattling of everybody's brains, where I think a lot of people woke up to the fact that, like, oh, it's not enough to just, like, that I'm not racist, or I'm not, homophobic, or I'm not transphobic, or I'm not whatever phobic you want to
I'm not a
discuss.
douchebag.
Right. It was always seemed like, well, I'm not like that, so, like, that's fine. It's like, I think the collective mentality does seem to have been like, that's not good enough anymore.
Hmm.
Like, you have to be making an effort, and I think that's good. That's good to see, I think, and I hope that is, like, something that will lead to positive
Look at what's
change.
going on in the world right now. We're in the middle of some of the biggest riots in years. And a lot of people, a lot smarter than I am, have said this is going to continue
Hmm.
until we start actually improving society somewhat. I'm reminded of the comic of the little guy saying we should improve society somewhat, and then the other guy's like, "Yeah, you participate in society. I am such a smart person." Yeah, it's like maybe we should actually start you know making things a little better, and then maybe people will feel less like destroying things.
Yeah.
There's a there's a philosophy in you know Star Trek. Star Trek's a good example of this. If you take away a person's need to suffer, if you take away their suffering, their need to be miserable, if you take away the things that are putting them down, then underneath that the belief goes that there's a good person underneath, that a person wants to be good if you take away all of the reasons that they had for being a shit given.
Hmm.
Now, of course, it's more complicated than that because, it also depends how people were raised. People tend to have the values from how they were raised. You know, they people, sometimes feel entitled to certain things. Privilege starts coming into effect. Do they feel like they deserve certain things? But if you take away all of the things, at least in the theory goes, if you take away all the things that are essentially keeping them down, are they a good person underneath all that? And I like to think that underneath all of that, there's a good person under there. It's just you need to take away all the things that are making them miserable.
Hmm.
So a big thing and that you discover when you're in a minority group is you discover minority on minority bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
Where, gay and lesbian people mistreating trans people is a good example that I can speak to. TERFs are a term that has come up lately. Trans exclusive radical feminists,
Mm-hmm.
which is a term that it is used to describe certain, they're often lesbians who like to be transphobic towards trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just limited to within the LGBT community, obviously. Sometimes I get shit on by folks from the Black community saying our issues are more important because there's more of us. Well, yes, that's true. But think of how much more powerful we would be if we were all working together instead of fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to have this philosophy of, we're better together than we are fighting each other, because as long as we are fighting each other, the rich douchebags and politicians are all running out the back door with all the cash.
Yeah. I wonder if it seems to me, and I'm sure that every person is kind of has their own reasons for being the way they are, but I always can't help whenever I read these people, and it's always some variation, it seems like to me, of the same, like the same thing of especially when it comes to this, like turf talking points, and it's always some variation of like trans women. If we support trans women, it takes value away from biological women and denies their experience, or something along those lines, right? Like that always seems to be some version of that, and it always strikes me as like born out of a place of, like, at its core, fear and misunderstanding.
And fear and misunderstanding is what leads to bigotry. The way you fight fear and understanding and bigotry is with education and understanding and getting to know people.
Yeah, it's just it's so strange, and I use that example, but I have the same kind of, my gut reaction whenever I hear any of these, like the classic talking points about whatever it is, whether it be someone who's transphobic or someone who's got a a homophobic thing, these people who don't want to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, or somebody who has some kind of a racist idea, like whatever their specific brand of talking point is, my reaction is always some form of like, what is it that's scaring you about the idea of this? Like I can't, I always just immediately whatever their talking point is resonates with me in some way that makes my reaction be like, I'm reading fear from you. And I think you kind of hit it there, is like fear and not understanding is born, bears bigotry.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't know, I maybe I have sort of an idealistic view of the world, and I'm sure I do, but it's like, I always think, like, if people would just talk to people, I think, like, if people would just have conversations with people, and it's like to kind of bring it around, as we, I think we've passed the 2-hour mark here, so I don't want to let this drag on forever. But to sort of bring it around to the, the beginning of our recording here, like, I'm always brought back to thinking about, like, when I was 13, 14, however old I was when we were first playing video games, playing City of Heroes together, and my first, even though I didn't know it at the time, my first, like, relationship with a trans person, like, was able to just be a friendship with a person, because of the internet. And so like I got the opportunity to, to just make a friend. And then so later I was lucky enough to have, the life experience where like the first time I ever had to be confronted with like, what do you think or how do you feel about like trans people or trans people's issues or anything like that. I had the ability to have the perspective of like, well, I know that my friend is, a person in her own right, and like this new piece of information is just a part of that, and is not even a part of that like affects like me in any way. Like it doesn't make me any less able to play video games and talk about nerd stuff and like the same things as this person. So like why is that something that I should harbor any like weird feelings about? And so it's
we play D&D too.
Yeah. So I guess that's has always shaped my opinion on, whatever it might be, whether it is, having to do with trans people, or whether it's, people of color, or people, any pick a group that people
minority
that people hate, right? And like I always come back to that experience of like, man, wouldn't it just be great if everybody could like just have the chance to like make some friends, and then like realize later that like, oh, hey, look at that, the fact that this person, is a trans person, or this is a person of color, or like none of that had any effect on, the fact that I can share things in common with this person and I can have a friend. And then like that's why I say like I'm probably stupid and ideal, is like I feel like if everybody would just like sit down and take the time to get to know, to throw the title of the show in here, like get to know other people, they would be like, I don't know, like bigotry would magically be erased. And I know of course that's not the case, but I like to think,
yeah, but maybe it could.
That yeah, if at least like we can open, the world can open up a little bit to like, let's like talk to each other and get to know each other a little bit. Maybe some of these divides could be, wouldn't seem so insurmountable to people.
A lot of them are based on fear. And it's like fear of someone they don't know. Mm-hmm. And if you remove the don't know, you can remove the fear. It's like, we're not trying to hurt anyone. We're not trying to, mistreat or abuse anyone. We're just trying to live our best life.
Yeah. Well, the last two episodes, as I wrap this up, I made a joke. I said, "Well, we've done it. We're heroes. We've solved everything.
We have solved everything forever.
We've solved everything together." I don't know that I feel like that's the case here. I feel like we, even in a joking manner, I feel like I cannot claim moral victory over all the world's problems, but I certainly feel like in the spirit of what I wanted this whole series and this whole sort of creative project of mine to be about, I certainly feel like I have gotten to know you much better. I feel that I have become better than I was 2 hours ago before we started this conversation through listening to you kind of share your experience with me, and I very much thank you for taking the time to do that. And I could ramble for another 10 minutes about the how much that means to me that you are willing to to sit with me and have this type of conversation, and that you're willing to share your life within your your experiences and yourself with me. And I hope that if I got as much as I did out of this, I hope that if anybody ever listens to this in the future, maybe they can get half as much as I did from it, and maybe it helps somebody somewhere gain a little bit of understanding about a fellow human being out there in the world. And I think that's and I hope they don't judge me too harshly on how bad I am at Final Fantasy XIV or my pants.
Oh God, those mismatched pants.
Well, no, you know what? They can judge me on the pants.
Yeah, we're gonna judge you on your fashion.
The everything else we've talked about, get on the right side of history and be a good person. But the pants, there's no excuse for.
So not all like trans people or other types of people are going to want to talk about things, but it's like, if I have made one contribution in my 40 years of life, let it be that I was willing to talk and say, this is how this is.
Yeah, and as I say, I very much appreciate it, and the whole reason I'm trying to do this is that I can want to be a more emotionally articulate and empathetic person, as much as as my desire can be there, as much as I want it to be, but unless I make that effort with the people in my life, and unless they are willing to share that and reciprocate that, there's only so far that I can go. And this continues to be, every time I do this continues to be massively personally rewarding for me to get these opportunities. So if for whatever it's worth, you've helped me sort of broaden my understanding of the world, and I only hope I can internalize some of the things we've talked about today and make myself better for it. And maybe somebody else can watch this in the future and do the same. So I'm going to pop off this recording now and begin the process of trying to find some new pants. And
I can always craft you some, I do.
Well, when we do the episode 2, we return, we'll do a follow-up episode in this sometime in the future, and I'll be like max level, and we'll run around and do a second session of these, and
hopefully be more fashionable.
Is there transmogging in this game?
Yes, there's a whole transmog system. It unlocks at level 15. But you need to do your story. Everything in this game is locked behind your story.
I'm working on it. Maybe I like lean into it. Maybe the pants are my signature. Maybe I really like swerve into the striped pants, and it's like my whole
the striped purple pants. Oh.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for hanging out with me for the last 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Thank you for having
I think
me.
this will probably
hang out with you.
Yes, it was great. We will do it again very soon, probably without all the recording software involved. And I think after I cut down probably the 15 to 20 minutes in the middle of this where I like confusedly ran around cutscenes and we didn't talk about anything except how I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing, I think this will probably edit down to a pretty clean 2 hours ish, and it'll be great. So thank you, and I will hopefully
thank you for having me.
Yes, and I will hopefully join any listeners that we might have on the next episode of Getting to Know You.